Hello, students, and welcome. Today, we're going to explore one of the most important life processes, something we all do every single second: respiration. We know we need to breathe to live, but have you ever really stopped to think about what that means? Well, today, we are going to find out exactly how it works. So, let's have a quick look at our plan for today. We'll start with a fundamental question about the breath of life. Then we'll see how plants breathe, which is quite interesting. We will also compare animals living in water and on land. After that, we'll take a deep dive into our own amazing respiratory system, understand how we breathe, and finally, what makes it all so efficient. All right, let's begin with our very first section, and a very important question. I want you to really think about this for a moment. You take a breath, and the air goes into your lungs, right? But how does that oxygen get from your lungs all the way to a tiny cell in your toe? It's not enough to just breathe it in. That oxygen has to be delivered everywhere. So how does that happen? Let's find out. Now, before we look at our own complex system, it really helps to start with something a bit simpler. So let's look at plants. You see, they breathe too, but they do it without any lungs. How do they manage that? Well, the secret is in these tiny little pores, which are mostly on the surface of leaves. These are called stomata. You can think of them as thousands of little openings that can open and close. And the exchange of gases here happens through a simple process called diffusion, which just means that gases move from a place where there is a lot of them to a place where there are fewer. It's a very natural process. So here's the main point. A plant's entire body is designed in a way that it doesn't need big, complicated lungs. Why? Firstly, each part of the plant, the leaves, the stem, even the roots, takes care of its own gas exchange. Secondly, because plants don't move around, their demand for energy and gas exchange is much lower than in animals. So for them, simple diffusion is perfectly enough. Okay, so that was about plants. Now let's move on to animals. And things get a little more complex when we compare animals that live in two completely different worlds, water and land. This table here shows a really fascinating contrast. Let's look at the oxygen availability row. For aquatic animals, like fish, the oxygen is dissolved in water, and there isn't that much of it. But for terrestrial animals, like you and me, the air in the atmosphere is full of oxygen. Now, this one single difference has a huge impact. Just look at the breathing rate. Because there is less oxygen available, a fish has to breathe much, much faster just to get the oxygen it needs. And that brings us to the human respiratory system. It's an absolutely incredible and very efficient piece of biological engineering. So let's trace the path that air takes when we breathe. Okay, let's follow the journey of a single breath. It all starts in the nostrils, where the air we breathe in is filtered and warmed. From there, it passes through the pharynx and larynx and into the main windpipe, which is called the trachea. The trachea then splits into two tubes called bronchi, with one going to each lung. Inside the lungs, these tubes branch out again and again into smaller and smaller bronchioles until they finally reach their destination, millions of tiny air sacs called the alveoli. And this is where the magic really happens. So we know the path the air takes, but how does the air actually get pulled in and pushed out? You see, our lungs don't do it all by themselves. Breathing is a mechanical process, a physical movement. Let's see how we inhale and exhale. During inhalation, that is when we breathe in, our chest cavity expands. It gets bigger. This increase in size creates a lower pressure inside our lungs compared to the air outside. And because of this pressure difference, air is automatically sucked into our lungs. And exhalation, or breathing out, is just the opposite. The chest cavity gets smaller. It contracts. This squeezes the lungs, which increases the pressure inside and forces the air out. And this table perfectly summarizes the two main players in this process. For inhalation, notice that the diaphragm contracts and flattens, while the rib cage lifts up and outwards. Both these actions make the chest bigger. And for exhalation, everything simply reverses. The diaphragm relaxes and moves up, and the ribs move down and inwards. It's a beautifully coordinated action. So we now know how air gets in and out. But what makes our system so very good at its main job, transporting oxygen? Let's look at the secret to its efficient design. This is where the actual gas exchange happens, in the alveoli. You can imagine them as millions of tiny balloon-like structures. And here's an amazing fact for you. If you could flatten out all the alveoli in your lungs, they would cover the area of a tennis court. Now, why so big? Well, this massive surface area is the key. It allows us to absorb the maximum amount of oxygen from every single breath very, very quickly. Now, just getting oxygen into the blood is not enough. It needs a delivery service, doesn't it? That is the job of hemoglobin. It's the pigment that makes our blood red. Think of hemoglobin as a taxi service for oxygen. It has a very strong attraction for oxygen, so it picks it up in the lungs and then carries it and drops it off to every single cell in your body that needs it. So, the most important thing to take away from this is that an organism's body design is perfectly suited for its respiratory needs. A plant can rely on simple diffusion. A fish must push a lot of water over its gills to get enough oxygen. And we humans have a complex lung system. Each design is a perfect solution for that organism's environment and its needs. So I will leave you with this final question. As you continue to study biology, whether it is digestion or circulation or anything else, always ask yourself this: how does this structure adapt the organism for survival? You will find that an organism's internal systems are always a perfect answer to the challenges of its world.